listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Interesting statistic, the healthcare sector generates more than 19 terabits of clinical data alone each year. That's as of May 31st, 2022, from a data dump JD Supra intelligence report. And that blows my mind. 19 terabits of clinical data each year. This is increasing. The question I have to our audience and listeners, and this is why we brought back a very special guest that has been a returning guest annually since 2021, Pamela Spence, EY Global Health Science and Wellness Industry Leader. We are curious. We have all this data. We finally see things happening in research, clinical trials, drug development, pharmacogenomics, nutrigenomics, and even opioid use disorder, where we're using data to do predictive stay ahead in what we call precision medicine or personalized medicine. So it's with great joy that I welcome back for the third time, Pamela Spence. It is so great to have you here.
Thanks, Todd, and it's great to be back, so to speak, and really excited and honored, really, to be part of the discussion this afternoon. It's really interesting what you just mentioned about the data, and I think I was not aware of that statistic precisely, but a similar statistic that I often think about is the explosion in health data and the trajectory of its growth, and the statistic being 36% CAGR predicted health data to grow between now and 2025, and the next industry growth rate is manufacturing and also financial services at around a 6% mark. So it just shows you that it's not only the quantum, as you said, it's the actual accelerating momentum and explosion in the generation of health data.
That's right. And the reason why I'm excited to have you here, there was an article that you authored that's titled "How Innovation Can Unlock the Power of Data to Deliver Value-Based Care." That to me is the expression rubber hitting the road. That's where data literally starts to make impact to the patients that are being cared for. The very complex decisions that physicians, pharmacists, and care teams have to make is based on data and the data that they're extracting, as well as predictive data that's going to be coming up. And I can even see customized medications on the fly when we start developing them more so and in clinical trials. So this article, would you just take time to set the ecosystem of this summary, and then we're going to definitely get into some questions.
Sure. And thanks, Todd. I think, the data, data is only valuable if you actually get insights from the data. And I say to many of our clients, data is a cost to house it, to keep it. But actually having the ability to interrogate that data and provide insight and being clear on what question, what business challenge or patient challenge you actually want the data to answer is the key to being able to interrogate the data to generate insights. And I think also the key is it's not just your data that you might own and have proprietary access to. It's how do you negotiate access to others' data sets to actually drive insight from them that you can then combine with your own. And that's why we, as you rightly cited, we talk about unlocking the power of data by connecting data sets, combining data sets and collaborating to generate insights to really drive a better health outcome and health experience. And I think all organizations, whatever part of the healthcare value chain you might participate in and have your core operating model, to have that notion that future value is going to be best for everybody and yourselves by unlocking that power of data to drive that power of data by connecting, combining, and generating insights to drive the health outcome and better experience. But we did a lot of work during the last year, and previously we'd been talking about the intelligent health ecosystem, which is really mixing the opportunity of having insights from that data and using technology again to drive a better personalized treatment plan, a more effective, more accessible, more affordable plan for the patient. And so we talk about this smart health or intelligent health ecosystem, which is really a trajectory from the old analog days, and then we go to maybe digitized model, which is really, I guess, the digitization of an existing operating model, to a connected model, and then to a truly smart model. And I often paraphrase the digitized model is you're using your own data. The connected model is you are collaborating with somebody else's data to increase your value proposition. And then the smart is a multiple interplay between multiple data sets. And what you get with that is, I think, digitized systems can be one way in terms of more diagnostic ability for patients and providers, payers, different stakeholders. Connected, I think we get more into the predictive element of how treatments can be delivered. But with a truly smart, intelligent health ecosystem, I think we can move from predictive very much to prescriptive. And I'll just indulge me with allowing to share an example. So, for example, in say you have a respiratory challenge, the old analog days, we're all too familiar with the inhaler. Ventolin, of course, being a leading inhaler. And then I think digitized, there's some organizations who specialize in the respiratory area. I was very impressed with in recent years. They teamed up with a weather station, and using and collaborating that data with a weather station, they were actually able to, I missed that a stage, sorry. Analog was the old inhaler. The digitized example was the inhaler with a chip that actually recorded when you puffed. And so you had a record of when you needed it. And connected then this weather station collaboration. With the weather station data, one was able to predict to the patient when they are more likely or not to have an episode, and so to take a preventative puff. But then, truly smart, wouldn't it be amazing if you actually looked at what causes asthma and respiratory disease? It's actually a neurological response to a trigger that then causes inflammation, which, of course, then the inhaler tries to calm down. Now, a truly smart system, why wouldn't you have a bioelectric implant, say, near the lungs, in the body, that could actually stop that neurological trigger manifesting itself in the inflammation? So you can move very, very smartly to actually preventing rather than treating. And that's an example of how the intelligent health ecosystem could work in the future. Having said that, though, what we're seeing is quite a disappointing innovation rate across the whole spectrum of stakeholders in the healthcare system, and things aren't really moving beyond digitized to connected, and certainly not at scale. Meaningful scale, we say, in more than 5 geographies. And I think that's a big disappointment. And so that's when we started to look at, well, why is this happening? And what is stopping us? Because the logic is all there. Actually, the data could be there if we linked it up with technologies, and technologies are moving super fast. But what is it that's actually really stopping us? And through various workshops with different stakeholders, we came very much to the conclusion it's actually, whilst we all want better treatment, better care, actually, when you look at what different stakeholders value when they're looking at their own business model, they value different things. So, the patient would like quicker access and in a convenient way. The provider really wants the most cost-effective, evidence-based treatment plan. The payer, of course, is looking more at the overall cost of trying to keep people well. The policymaker is looking at, at a population health rather than an individual health. And the biopharma companies, of course, would like to get their new innovative medicines to as many people as fast as possible, those who need them. So whilst you look at what people value and how they define, therefore, value-based care when they look at their business model, it's sort of the same, but fundamentally it's not the same. And therefore, people are making investments to suit a density of their criteria, as opposed to collaborating with somebody else, perhaps going a bit deeper in the data, perhaps expanding what that data might be that I want to look at, interrogate, use technology to unlock the power of. And I think it's that lack of alignment in terms of what is valued and therefore what is prioritized and therefore what is investing in is that's stifling the opportunity that we all have to really make those jumps in innovation from digitized to connected to smart, as I outlined above. So I'll pause there, Todd. I mean, there's more in our report, of course, and we still go on about the consumer experience, and healthcare is nowhere near how seamless and connected perhaps other experiences are with platforms such as Amazon, Netflix, Uber, etc. But that's a sort of précis in our report, and a sort of urgent call for, how can we collaborate better? I think it's the devil is in the detail of the data and the data sets.
Well, Pamela, I enjoyed the way that the article was laid out, including the graphs that were used and the segments of the 5 players in what is healthcare innovation, what is value-based care. And as you mentioned, the patient, the provider, the payer, the policymaker, and the biotech or med tech companies. And when I'm listening to you and the frustration in your voice, knowing that we have the data, we have had it for many years. Now we have the technology to decipher and start utilizing. Now we have the technologies to start implanting the data in order to make better decisions. And as we said, sometimes predictive decision-making based on the mass outcomes of certain patients on certain, let's say, medications or treatment modalities or whatever it is. I think that there is a fight between the payer, the policymaker, and the biotech or medtech organizations that are slowing down innovation, where the provider and the patient are standing on the sidelines waiting for those 3 other entities to get their game in play. And the profit or the money that is there based on government funding or private funding or whatever it may be, it starts to cloud incentives to the payer, the policymaker, and the biotech or medtech provider in what is best for the organizations that need the medications, need the technologies, and of course, population health, the people that need these services. And we could talk on a whole nother podcast about organizations that know that their communities are suffering, or communities nearby where they don't even have enough healthcare services, regardless of all of the data and innovation. So what I want to just know from your perspective is kind of an ecosystem question. How do organizations collaborate to shrink the risk, data, and rewards, and realize that there really is a better future out there if we did align better?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I recognise the challenge that you outline, of course, but I do think it's we each of us, and I think, no one is going to do it and then we can just follow. I think there's a responsibility in each of us to think a bit broader. And I'll give you a good example. That one of the, I mean, I know this isn't necessarily to sell EY's capabilities and solutions, but we do have, and we have invested in, I'm very proud of it. We're calling it our health outcomes platform, but it's a mechanism at which the biopharma and the provider or payer, sometimes they're the same, can actually contract to get access to new innovations, and payment is then can be flexible. And a particular example, it was, again, the payer wants something cost effective. The provider wants something that works, and evidence is that it works. And the biopharma company, of course, wants to get their innovation and get appropriately or fairly paid for it. So we, in the construct of our health outcomes platform, as I'm, a biochemist by background, and I'm still very passionate that we're only going to get innovation if somebody pays for it, but innovation should only be rewarded when it actually has worked and or prescribed in patients where it's more likely to work than not. And that's not always what we have today. So this particular example, using our health outcomes platform, there was a biopharma company that had a new medicine that was a subcutaneous variant of a previous IV infusion. And it's, I'm sure, not lost on your listeners that going from an IV perhaps to a subcut probably, it did induce, but I'm sure your listeners are ahead of me, a whole new patent life, and the IV was subject to generic competition. So their incentive, of course, was to move patients on this IV ×6 to a once subcut injection. That was what they really wanted to avoid. We have to also have commercial models, otherwise they don't work. Then they're just philanthropic pilots which don't scale. Now, what the provider, and in this instance it was a provider payer, but what they wanted is something that was proven to work, but in the general scheme of things was more cost effective. So we came up with, well, okay, the contract was, there were 6 outcome measures. There was, and 3 were clinical, 3 were non-clinical. I think it's really important for us all in the industry to recognize that it's not always a clinical outcome that is valued by the patient. Quality of life are also, in the patient's mind, often equal. And what the payer provider wanted was actually, if I think about a once injection, if it proves to work, is much more cost effective than a 6 times in infusion, and or it could be delivered at home, perhaps with a skilled practitioner, nurse practitioner visiting, or even if the patient was up to it, actually delivered themselves. So you can understand here, you've got actually the same outcomes measures if they worked, and then there was a reimbursement variation for completely different reasons. The pharma company was happy because it met their prioritization of value, and the payer and provider was happy because it also met their prioritization of value. But the trick to bring it together and to collaborate was actually understanding what data do we need to investigate to actually agree that these 6, 3 clinical, 3 non-clinical outcome measures had actually been met or not. So I do think it's possible. I understand the, and of course you have to go into individual drugs, individual therapeutic areas to actually get that level of specificity to avoid what you articulated as, this perceived conflict. But we do have data and we do have technology that can replicate at scale some very narrow parameters that I do believe, when we outcomes-based it, can actually overcome this apparent mismatch in terms of what is value. And everybody can align, and everyone then can feel good about the outcome.
Thank you for that. It's it's aligning and bringing into focus what is value-based care based on the players and the data. I think of before we started recording, you and I were talking about moving through the evolution of where we were going from analog to digitized care to connected care to smart health system. And I love the suggestion and the outline, the ideas that have been presented in this article. So how do we move? When I think of this, I think of the players, I think of how difficult this is. And this is worldwide. This isn't just here in the country, United States, or even in Europe or anywhere really, modern or not even modern settings where they have the challenges to delivering healthcare, getting healthcare services out there. But how do we move from a slowly digitizing world to a connected care and then ultimately moving to this smart health system that you've outlined?
I think the biggest shift, and I think most developed and also developing countries are at elements of digitized. So I think the real jump comes from digitized to connected, and that means collaboration with one extra person. And smart, of course, is multiple collaborations, all interconnected, interoperable. But I think the biggest thing is, excuse me, when each of us is thinking about how can I drive better value for my organization? There's almost certainly some clearly defined parameters, because every organization will have the strategy outlined. And then I think the better question to then ask is, now, what data sets do I really need to interrogate to give me a better value proposition? And then adjoined with that is, now, is there another stakeholder in the ecosystem that actually I then could collaborate with to help me gain access to their data, to help me with a stronger value proposition? And then think, okay, let me approach them, let me be very specific. But if they understand what I'm trying to do, then they're likely to have a similar request. Have I got data that might be valuable to them? And I think that's what we talk about, unlocking the power of data, because it has to start with the data that you own and or have access to. That, I think, will unlock it. That and the spirit of collaboration, and actually having a strategic notion that actually, if I had access to somebody else's data, I would actually drive a much better, bigger value proposition for myself and my organization. And that might be measured in profit terms. It might be measured in a patient number of patients. I can see, depending everyone has to make a bottom line and be commercial, whether you're for profit or not for profit. Everyone has to be commercially viable. So that, I think, that's why I come back to, I said earlier, it's on us all to start thinking, how can I enhance my organization's value proposition with somebody else's data?
Yes. And it opens up a deeper study that EY invested in. And within this article, and be sharing with our listeners in the show notes of this podcast, you will find a link to this article, How Innovation Can Unlock the Power of Data to Deliver Value-Based Care. Inside this is another link that takes us to a 24 slide PDF that breaks it down even further, which also references the 5 irrefutable facts that are affecting the healthcare industry, such as socioeconomic forces, our required capital efficiency, workforce shortages. Goodness gracious, everybody knows that's since the pandemic has really increased in knowledge of our workforce shortages. Customer engagement, and under customer engagement is the interpretation of value of the care that a patient is getting. I think of the evolution of our mobile phone, and when the iPhone came out, it was a revolution to the the customer experience and the engagement that phone gave us, that platform gave us. It was brilliant. And then the fifth one is technology integration, and one of my favorites, because I'm a techie nerd, and I love listening to technologists and theorists and people on the EY team like you, Pamela, that really kind of dissect this and what it means for healthcare overall. Talk to us just as an overview before we wrap up today, digging into this this presentation. What can we flag for our pharmacists out there who are very sensitive to the totality of data, meaning data equaling value-based care?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I was half expecting us to sort of close on. So, what does it mean for the pharmacist? I think it's been amazing since the advent of COVID, and I often argue that probably the only good thing to come out of COVID was the demonstration by patients or consumers desire and need to have care, mobile phones, or outside of the traditional setting. So I think that has only whetted its appetite. And you referred to some of our slides. We've actually done a consumer health survey that was actually released last week that actually looks at consumers' attitude to health data. And again, it's not the consumers that are holding back sharing data if they actually know. That's key. They want to know where it's going. So I think that the whole COVID, virtual care, remote care, people beginning to change their cultural mindset, and actually wanting to share data and receive care in different settings. I think that only accelerates then the push that people want a health experience like we have on Netflix and Uber and Amazon. And I think that the pharmacists have a real opportunity. I mean, in the healthcare worker shortage, the primary care physicians are absolutely overwhelmed. So, what business model is, what an opportunity for pharmacists to move much more, and I know there's legislation, but move much more into prescribing, perhaps with the knowledge that they can offer a better customer experience, because so many of our pharmacies physically are located in very convenient places, by their very nature. So I think that I was just thinking, what advice do I give to my 18-year-old niece who's just finished her school and, wants a year out before she goes to college, or we would say in a UK university. And maybe it's something like pharmacy, because I can see the opportunity that pharmacy has to really seize an experience gap in the healthcare ecosystem is huge. And I think that, I don't believe it's too far off to have a much broader ability to prescribe. And again, each geography is different. So I think that is the opportunity for the pharmacist to offer that better health experience, and linking in, of course, to the local payers and providers much more tightly than perhaps have been done in the past. And I'm sure some are there more than others, but that to me is, we will demand as patients and consumers experience in our healthcare, because we see it and experience it in many other aspects of our lives. So there's no reason from a patient or consumer's perspective why healthcare should be different. Pharmacists have a huge opportunity, I think, there.
Absolutely. Yep. And I want to give our listeners who are driving to work right now or walking or listening, I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about this question. If you want to engage, please at SpenceEY Podcast. Pamela, you're on Twitter as well, so they could definitely find you on LinkedIn. But I want to ask the question, how will you jumpstart innovation to unlock the power of data to deliver value-based care in your pharmacy setting? How are you going to jumpstart innovation? Think of yourself as a community pharmacist. What could you be doing to really help jumpstart innovation based on your documentation, based on collection of what your patient is telling you, putting that into your capturing and note system, sharing that information with other providers and physicians, collaborators, and then rinse and repeat, whether that's in our senior care positions or our rare disease states or really any of the sectors, our hospital system pharmacists. But it really is a wonderful report. I want our listeners to take time to go through and read. Like I said, we'll have links in the show notes. This has become a very special annual opportunity to talk with Pamela Spence with EY. And this has been, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show. We're going to be looking for you to return for your fourth, because this has become a tradition with us. And Pamela, I just thank you.
Thanks very much, Todd. It's delighted to join you this afternoon.